So let's get ready for a valuable session filled with practical insights on dealing with the IRCC from Dorothea Agne.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dorothea Agne. I'm the operations supervisor at Joorney. As part of my role as the operations supervisor, I talk to a lot of clients and I'm responsible for overseeing the delivery of thousands of business plans per year. Now, most of the time, cases come to me once something is wrong. So I rarely get involved with cases where everything is going right. And in that capacity, I read a lot of denial, refusal notes, and refusal letters from the immigration. And I try to find ways in which we can improve all of our business plans or identify the issues that are repeating itself, etc. So this is a very important role because, as you know, the immigration officers are constantly looking for better and better business plans. The criteria is growing. It's always improving. So we need to be running ahead of it. So today we'll be talking about the common refusal reasons and ways to overcome them. We're also going to be discussing the key factors in RCC assessment and briefly go over the ways to improve credibility and viability of the business plan. But before I continue, I just wanted to briefly mention two things. First of all, as you know, Joorney does not hire any immigration consultants nor immigration lawyers. And for this reason, we're not able to provide any legal guidance and we do not strive to do so. This webinar, we'll be talking about refusals from the point perspective of writing business plans and ways to make the business plans look better for the officer. Second thing that I wanted to mention is the key thing here is to notice that while some denials can be prevented, and some cases can go better with a better business plan. This is not always a guarantee, as you know, in real life. I've seen a lot of cases that sometimes you have a successful case. And sometimes the other case is very similar, but yet not successful. So it's not always about the business plan. It could also be about the quality of the supporting documents, the quality of the experience of the applicant. It could be even something like luck. So there are so many factors to be involved, but this is a game where you need to be ahead of the game all the time and you need to be improving every part of the application all the time in order to secure better outcomes for your clients. So let's talk about the business plan itself. This is a very important part of the application and it has to be well structured. It has to explain the idea in simple terms in a way that an immigration officer can understand and relate to it. It has to demonstrate that the business is feasible, that there's a market potential for it. The projections need to be realistic. And above all, it needs to prove that there's a significant benefit that this business can grant to Canada. So it needs to create jobs, contribute to economic priorities, and all other things that we'll be covering in this webinar. So, in addition to the business plan, there's a variety of supporting documents that could be helpful, such as investment proof. This is very important. Then the contracts with Canadian partners, letters of support, or letters from interested parties, and any kind of a documentation that would help prove the past entrepreneurial success. One thing to emphasize here is that if you read a lot of refusal notes, you might get to the conclusion that letters of support are often mentioned, but they're very rarely submitted. And this is because it's very difficult for applicants who have not set foot to Canada, for example, to get the letters of support from the local communities, from the local businesses, or even in some cases potential clients. Nevertheless, this is a very important step, and if there are such letters, that would greatly impact the chances of getting the approval. Now, without further ado, let's talk about the top 5 reasons for refusal. And here I listed them not in the order of how often they occur, but I just wanted to group them into categories that I feel like are most important. If we talk about the frequency, the most frequent reason would be a lack of significant benefits to Canada, and then also concerns over temporary intent. Those two things are listed on the majority of letters. But then if you get specific notes from the officer, you might get additional things mentioned, such as insufficient business viability, lack of proof of intent and commitment, and weak investment capacity. So as for the investment, some of the concerns that are raised are pertaining to the amount that will be invested and whether this amount would be sufficient to start such a business. Now let's talk about the lack of significant benefit. This is, I think, included in like 80% of the cases I see as a refusal reason. So I'm talking about the cases where the refusal was existent. And the reason for that is just because that's a very important part of the program. So we're mostly talking about C11 and C12 here. And I wanted to give you an explanation that I feel like over the years of working in this industry, I've come to realize that it's not always about the business plan. The business plan comes as the pinnacle of the whole process, but we are really starting with the idea stage. So think about it this way. If you were starting a business in Canada, you would probably think about the things that you know how to do and the things you believe you would be successful doing. So in my case, I was thinking about it, and I've been working on consulting clients for years related to starting a business, related to successfully improving it, and then also I've been dealing with a lot of clients who've been interested in immigration. So that could be my niche. And when I think about it, I could be starting a business that provides consulting services. But this would be a wrong approach. It's because this kind of businesses, consulting businesses, have a very limited scalability, meaning that there are not many jobs that can be created by a consulting company, and it cannot grow fast. Also, if you look at the investment that would be needed for me to start this type of a business, it's not going to be a substantial investment, meaning that I would probably need to rent an office. I would probably need to pay a salary to 1 or 2 employees, and then I'll probably need to invest some money into marketing. But beyond that point, that's not such a large sum. So the impact to Canada may not be so great. So here, what is the error in this case? The error is that I chose an idea that is not easily scalable. And also, I'm kind of limiting my possibility to impact economy through numbers, to numbers that matter, investment and job creation. Now, there's no doubt that over some time, I might be able to hire some additional people, but it's not going to be a very big business. So that's number one. Now, if you think further than that, you're going to think about businesses that you would be able to start that are in fact scalable, and you would be able to do them. So my second thought could be like, why don't I start, for example, a restaurant? It seems very easy. It seems like the investment would be higher. I would be able to create jobs. And it seems like, for example, if I find a franchisor who knows what they're doing, they would be able to tell me where to locate my store, how the store should look like. They have all the recipes, they have all the know-how. So it's an easy business for me. This is something that's known to me, and even though I don't have so much experience with it, I would be more comfortable with starting something like this than, for example, starting a factory for manufacturing pet food. So that's error number two. A lot of people are considering ideas that are known to everyone, but are not necessarily um, deficient in Canada. So Canada is looking for ideas that would help advance their economic priorities, ideas that are innovative, ideas that have a unique value proposition. And overall, they're looking at ideas for businesses that are not already present in the market, that are lacking. So there's no way they're going to say, hey, we have a lack of restaurants. We want someone to come in and open a restaurant. So they would probably be focusing on other economic priorities, mainly green energy, and then AI, tech advancement, innovative solutions, improving infrastructure, solving healthcare issues, solving affordable housing issues. So those are the main priorities that the government is having, and none of them include opening something so mundane as, for example, a restaurant. Now, I'm not saying that a restaurant cannot be successful under any circumstances. That would be wrong, because we have a lot of clients who've been successful with ideas that are very simple, such as a restaurant. But there are some things to be taken into consideration if you want to prove significant benefit to Canada in that case. So you firstly need to select a location that's not in an oversaturated market. So that could be a very small town, a rural area where maybe there's a restaurant or two, or maybe there are no restaurants. And this would be a situation where opening one would substantially help people who live there to feel better with their lives, to be able to get entertainment, maybe try something new, etc. Also, there are ways to define this idea in a way that it provides a unique value proposition. So it could be some new untried recipes. It could be some special cuisine that it's not prevalent in the city, that no one is doing it. It could be some special way of preparing the dishes, so some kind of innovation. So I'm not saying it's not going to be successful. I'm saying that you need to take extra work to make that idea work. So that's the bottom line. The significant benefit can definitely be improved. It can be worked on. It can be elaborated further in the business plan. But if the business idea itself is not created with immigration in mind, then that could be a real issue later. Now let's talk about the insufficient business viability. This is the second error that I see a lot of people make, and that is that they start a business, or they're getting into the stage of writing a business plan, but they don't really have proof or market demand. And what this means is you want to test whether or not people are interested in buying your service or your product. So it could be very simple as conducting a survey, or conducting interviews locally, or maybe like contacting a couple of businesses via email, just to get a glimpse of an idea of whether they would be interested in something like this or not. And this is something that's also done before the business plan, because at the stage when you are writing the business plan, that is the stage where you already know if you like the idea or not. It's just about describing how you plan to fulfill that idea. Whereas this stage where you're researching before the business plan is a stage where you need to determine if this is idea worth pursuing or not. Now, the second issue that we come across is that some people don't have enough funds, or they have unrealistic expectations when it comes to financial projections. And this could also be something that the officer might bring up by saying that similar businesses are usually started with more capital, or that similar businesses usually make less money over the first year or two. Now, this is a tricky part because if you read a lot of those refusal letters and notes, you will see that sometimes the notes can be contradictory from case to case. So, in one case, you might receive information that um, 200,000 isn't enough for starting some business, and then in the other one, this might not be an issue at all. Also, in one, they might say that 20 employees is too many for such a business. And then the other one, they might say that 20 is not actually a significant benefit on the industry. So, like I said, there are many different factors involved, but it's important to note that some of the things are universal. And not having enough funds can usually be proven by looking into other businesses and what other businesses are doing. Then the thing about the competitive advantages, I really wanted to focus on that one because I've seen that in so many notes from officers where they're really just concerned for the business and whether it would be able to get a successful first year or second year by implementing the business strategy that they have in mind. And that is because they don't see apparent competitive advantages included. And what that means is you need to have something that really stands out from other businesses in the area. And it's not just about saying what it is, it also has to be elaborated upon. So let me give you an example. I think that could make it easier for understanding. So let's say you're a trucking business and you want to have a competitive advantage of being more efficient in route management. So what that means is you will probably need some kind of software that would need to be implemented in order to have more efficient routing. Usually, they would want you to identify the type of a software that you plan to use. And if possible, if you look at those software solutions available in the market, they usually tell you the percentage of efficiency increase. So they might say, your route management will be more efficient by 20% as opposed to not using this software. So, including the name of the software and including the quantifiable efficiency impact would really help you get better chances of proving the competitive advantages. However, they might also argue that since this software is available to um, other companies in the market as well, this not might not be a unique competitive advantage. So the way to to fight this is to include a competitive advantage that would not be able to be disproven by simply saying that others can do the same thing. And that would be to introduce a solution that you made yourself. So, for example, if the client has been operating a trucking company abroad, they might have developed an internal solution that they have been using abroad, and that solution could be introduced in Canada. So that's one way of saying I have a solution that no one else has, and there's no way you can say that others can use that solution as well because no one has access to it. Now let's talk about the lack of proof of intent and commitment. Lately, we've seen that the officers are really looking for proof that this business is legitimate, that the business is in fact operating or at least making some efforts to become operative. So sometimes they ask for the business to be registered, they're asking why there's no lease agreement, or why there are no expenses made so far that would demonstrate that something is happening. So those expenses could be, for example, legal expenses. You spoke to a lawyer, you asked him how to operate in the market. Are there any obstacles that you need to be aware of? Is it even possible to do something like what you had envisioned in Canada? Because sometimes legal things can be different in different countries. And then, for example, you could hire someone for accounting services to ask them how to start a company, what are the necessary administration steps you need to take, etc. So those are all proof that you are committed to starting the business, and it's not just a fictional business that was created for the purpose of obtaining a work permit. There's also a situation with a weak justification for choosing Canada. This is something that we see sometimes with the officers who are asking why this business cannot be started elsewhere, or, for example, why can it be started from home? Why is the physical presence of the applicant necessary in Canada? So that's basically a weak justification of why you choose Canada. So here you should include a very succinct list of things that led you to believe that Canada would be a good ground for your idea, such as, for example, if there's a good target market for you, if the customers are willing and waiting for something like this, if, for example, the laws and the situation in the country are suiting your needs, etc. So that's the second thing. And then there's also no elaboration on plans and timelines. Think of the immigration officer as a detective. So they're reading the business plan and they're wondering if they can learn more about the business itself, where it's going to be located, what kind of actions they will be taking. And sometimes when they read the business plan, it seems to them that the business is fictional. And that's because there are no elaborate plans and timelines for things. So they might be like thinking, hey, this business plan is up in the air. I can't seem to grab onto anything. It doesn't seem like someone has really planned the steps of what's going to happen when he gets to Canada. It just seems theoretical. So the business plans that are theoretical are usually not successful. So sometimes it's important to emphasize this to clients on our side, but then also on the side of consultants and attorneys. Let's say this happens every once in a while. The client comes to us and says, I don't know what will be the location of the business. I'll figure that part out when I get to Canada. So that's simply not enough. It's not satisfactory because the temporary nature of this work permit doesn't really allow for the client to wander around and look for a location for months before starting the business. It's really a better move that things are already thought about up front. So even if you don't have a lease agreement that's signed, there are things that you can do to persuade the officer that you are taking the necessary steps. So one thing would be to contact a local broker and to ask them if there are any opportunities in the area. Just by contacting him, you're showing that you are actually considering getting a location for yourself. Then the second thing would be to investigate, and we would probably do that in the business plan, to investigate the rates in the area to see how much that kind of a lease might cost. And then also, a very good sign is if you know what kind of a square footage you will need and what kind of space you will need. Should it be oriented towards the street? Should it be, I don't know, 300 square meters, or 50 would be enough? So the thing is, if you know exactly what you're looking for, that means you've given it some thought, which means that you are actually considering starting that business, and it's not just a fictional idea that you have in your mind just for the purpose of securing a work permit. Now let's talk about the weak investment capacity. This is quite straightforward. Usually, the officer is concerned that the investment is lower than needed. We rarely get issues with higher investments, but those happen as well. So one thing that the officer is looking at, they're looking at the investment amount and seeing whether this fits with the similar businesses that they've seen in the past. If it's an amount that seems reasonable. And how do you determine the reasonable amount? You look at the expenses of the business, but you're not just focusing on the capital expenses, which would be, for example, if you're buying a property, or you're buying a vehicle, or if you're buying equipment, or something like that that can be used for a prolonged period of time. So that's important. But then also, you need to take into consideration the operating expenses as well. And a lot of people are saying, okay, so I don't have enough money to cover my operating expenses right away. But as I will be making sales, I will be able to cover my operating expenses. But this will also not be sufficient, because the immigration might question whether unexpected situations were accounted for. So let's say you anticipate making sales from month 5 or month 6, and you accounted for 6 months of operating expenses being covered from your sales. But then what happens if you actually start making sales in month 9 or month 11? That means that you might not be able to cover the payroll expenses. You might not be able to pay for the salaries of people. You might not be able to cover the rent. All of those things are very negative. So the officer wants to see that operating expenses are covered by the initial investment. We've seen cases where the operating expenses for the first year are $500,000, whereas the investment itself is $200,000. And this is sure to raise doubts. So the rule of thumb is, you need to think about the unexpected situations. You need to cover both CapEx and OpEx, and you also need to take into consideration what similar businesses have spent in the past. And last but not the least, concerns over temporary intent. I can tell you that this is a very frequent issue. So it might be my number 2 reason in my head, but um, your experience might be different. And that basically is tied to the fact that people are often unable to demonstrate ties to their home country. And this could successfully be done through supporting documents, such as, for example, proof that you have properties abroad, you have family abroad, or perhaps you have someone. Someone waiting for you to work with you. For example, you have a business abroad that's dependent on you, and you cannot be absent for a long time. So you should find as many reasons as you can and demonstrate them as reasons why you cannot stay in Canada for more than a year or two, which is usually the period that they are considering as temporary. So I've seen in refusal notes explicit mentions of officers saying that the fact that there's no exit strategy in the plan is actually making them refuse the case. But if you think about an exit strategy, this is not a regular exit strategy that you see in investor business plans, where you will be talking about mergers, acquisitions, you would be talking about selling the shares, or any similar things. Here, This is an exit strategy for exit from the country. And this is something that's included specifically in immigration business plans. And for this reason, we included an exit strategy in almost all of our C11 and C12 business plans. Of course, we always consult with immigration consultants, immigration lawyers. We want to see their view of things. And if they also believe that an exit strategy should be included, or we go on and include it. Let me just describe it briefly as to what kind of elements you should expect in an exit strategy in an immigration business plan. So, for once, you should have someone, a successor, coming to replace the applicant after an agreed period of time. So, usually that's a year or two, depending on the case. So the successor is usually a person that needs to be trained for a certain period of time. And this person should be operating in a position with the same knock code as the applicant. This is very important because when you're replacing someone, you need to replace them with the person that's qualified to do that job. So that's one thing. You need to set a period of time for the applicant to be replaced. You need to identify a person that's going to do it. You don't have to include a name, of course, but you need to include what kind of qualifications you would expect from this person, and when this person needs to start, and what kind of training this person needs to receive. Then you also have to talk about the strategy to train this person, and the strategy to create the business that is not dependent on the applicant. You remember the example that I had previously where I spoke about opening a consulting company myself? You see, that's a kind of a business where the entire business relies on me. That kind of a business doesn't exist without me because I'm the key person there who provides the consulting service on my own. If you build a business that's reliant on you and you cannot be replaced, then it's very difficult to talk about the temporary nature of that business. So, what you want to do is create a role that can be replaced if certain conditions are met. So when you get to Canada, for example, you're starting the business and you're defining the strategy, you're defining the location, you're defining how the business will be done. So the procedures, the processes, everything needs to be put in place. And then this new person can come in and simply be guided by the things that you already did in the past. So there are different types of leaders out there. You have leaders who are good at starting businesses. You have leaders who are, for example, good at getting businesses out of trouble. Those are the people you call after, for example, the business has been successful for 7 years, but now all of a sudden it's not working. So those are the people for crisis situations. Then you have people who are good for, professional management of businesses that are stable. In this case, you want to demonstrate that the applicant is the person who is good at starting businesses and knows how to get them going from zero, because that's a very special and unique skill type that can be only delivered by someone who already did something similar in the past. If you can demonstrate that the applicant has started a very similar business in the past elsewhere, that's a very big plus. So here you want to demonstrate that the temporary nature of the applicant's role is precisely because this person is only summoned to start the business from scratch and to set up everything so that someone who comes as a successor can successfully manage the business without their help. Obviously, you can also mention that the applicant will be willing to, come to Canada once in, I don't know, 6 months, or provide online advice, over Zoom or whatever. Um, So it's not that the applicant has to be absent from the business forever. It's just that his imminent presence in Canada will no longer be required. That's the only reason that you can demonstrate that this is a temporary thing. Now let's talk about the key factors in RCC assessment. I think we went through a lot of those things, so I'm just going to briefly mention some of it. First of all, you need to have very clear business objectives, and you also have to have a description of the strategy to get to those objectives. So your objectives cannot be something like, my objective is to increase sales, or my objective is to decrease expenses or increase profit. That's too vague. You need something that's very specific. For example, if you are interested in reducing your expenses, you must identify what part of the expenses can be reduced, or what is your focus. So, for example, in this case, my focus might be to improve the ratio between personnel costs and sales. So, for example, for $1 invested in salaries, I want to see $2 coming in as sales. Whereas the current situation, for example, might be that I'm spending $1.5 on personnel, and I'm only getting $2 as sales. So that's the goal. That's more concrete. And then if you have a concrete goal, then the strategy is also more palpable. So the strategy here might be, for example, to investigate the whole process of providing the service, then looking at what part of the process lasts for how long, see if any part of it can be automated, and if any part of it can be optimized to spend less time without compromising the quality. And all sorts of things can be created as a strategy if the goal is concrete enough. So the second part would be to create a detailed market analysis, and you need to demonstrate that you have knowledge of the Canadian market. So nothing loses the immigration attention faster than saying that you will operate a business that simply cannot be operated in Canada. For example, let's imagine you want to plant a certain crop, and you suspect that this will be possible in Saskatchewan, and then the officer looks this up, and they demonstrate that this crop cannot be successfully grown in Saskatchewan. This is like your ticket for out. It's just simply a thing that cannot be overcome, and the application itself is surely going to fumble. So demonstrating this knowledge of the Canadian market is important through especially focusing on the demand, whether there are clients who are interested in something like this, then focusing on the competitors, who else is doing this, are they successful at it, what's lacking, how can I beat them, how can I do it better than them, how can I do it different than them. And then there's also considerations about the potential customer base. So if you're saying I'm going to target everyone, then usually that's a very negative sign, because any business that has such a wide target is surely going to fail. So you need to have some kind of a niche. And I'm going to give you one more example. I'm going to talk about trucking again, just because I recently saw this in a refusal letter in the notes from the officer, where the officer was very concerned about the trucking business because it was very vague. So the executive summary of the business plan basically reads, the company is going to do trucking services in the Toronto area, and it's going to transport any types of goods. So there are a couple of red flags here. And just to mention, Not all the refusals that we review are for the business plans that we necessarily write. Sometimes those are business plans written by other people, by applicants themselves, etc. So I'm just giving you some hypothetical examples. And here in this case, saying that you will transport any type of goods is usually very negative because not every truck can be used for any type of goods. For example, there are specialized refrigerated trucking where you are only transporting refrigerated goods. Then there are specific trucks for oversized items, then for grains, whatever. So there are different kinds of goods, and they're all transported with using different kinds of trucks. Even once we had a case that was really interesting because they were transporting bees. So as you can see, transporting bees would require a very specific compartment in the back where you can attach the colonies in their habitat and safely transport them. So that's a very specific business, and the point is that the officer will see if the business seems like it's not thought through, and this was the case here. So what you want to do is, even if you're operating in an area such as Toronto, which is bound to be giving you hardships because business plan for such esteemed locations, for such locations where so many people want to live, so those business plans are highly scrutinized, and it's very difficult to get in. So apart from that, you also have a business that's not described in detail, and that's surely a refusal. So what was the point of what I was saying? The point was you have to be concrete. You have to talk about the demand to see, for example, if in that area there's a lack of transporting companies who are transporting a certain type of goods that you know how to transport. And then you have the adequate equipment for something like this. And then the competition is much lower because you're not competing with just any transportation company in the industry. You're competing specifically with the companies that are providing the same service. What you also want to think about is the financial projections and whether they're credible and achievable. Um, this is a very common issue that's also raised a lot in refusal letters and the summaries from officers. And the point here is sometimes people present projections that cannot be done. There was one occasion that I saw where the applicant was claiming that they will provide um, a certain number of services that the officer seemed like he thought about it, and he was like, that's not even possible. Because if you're starting a business and you also have to focus on the strategy, you need to hire people, you need to find clients, you need to set a time for all of those activities. If you're spending all of your time providing the consulting services yourself, then you would not be able to focus on all of those other things, the things that a typical owner has to deal with. So the officer in this case was contemplating about the financial projections and was correct to say that the projections seem a bit too high given the fact that there are not many employees at that point. For example, in year one, there was only 2 employees in addition to the applicant, and the fact that the applicant will need to dedicate almost all of his time on providing consulting services alone. So that's one example of how they can determine if the financial projections are not realistic. But there are other things that could be red flags as well. Uh, our famous example with the trucking, if you're saying that you will charge for a certain number of miles, You need to have a certain number of trucks in order to be able to work on so many miles. If you have one truck, but you are saying that you will have, I don't know, 500 miles charged per hour, that's simply not possible because the truck is not going to be able to go through so many miles per hour. Those are the ways that the immigration is assessing whether the financial projections are realistic, but they're also looking if there are any sudden spikes. For example, your projections are increasing from 500,000 in year one to 5 million in year five. So they might raise concerns that usually businesses are not scaling so fast and so abrupt, and they are usually they need some time to grow from 500 to 5 million, and that's usually not 5 years. So what you also need to do is to provide evidence that the business will create significant benefit and jobs. This is something that I mentioned before. If you think of businesses, not every business has the potential to hire too many employees, and not every business has the potential to provide significant benefit. So you need to think about this part in the idea stage, and then in the stage of the business plan, you need to also find ways to make it work. So let's say you have a restaurant, like I mentioned before, it's a tricky business, but you can also make it work. But here you need to think about how you're going to scale it. So the way to scale it would be, for example, to anticipate that in 2 or 3 years, you're going to move to a bigger location and hire more people. Or you can anticipate that after a couple of years, you're going to open a second location using the same know-how. So these are all ways you can explain the spike in the number of employees and explain that your presence in Canada is going to be very beneficial because it's going to create a lot of jobs. Now, we also want to talk about risks associated with the business, and this is also something that immigration officers are often quick to mention. If the applicant is not taking into consideration what type of issues he will be encountering in Canada, that might indicate that number one, he might not be successful and the whole situation is not going to be positive for Canada. Or number two, he hasn't given it much thought, signaling that this might not be a legitimate business. So it doesn't have to be like a specific section in the business plan that's completely separate and only lists the risks. It's not good to just list the risks without saying how you will overcome them. It's about noticing what kind of risks can happen and mentioning them throughout the business plan. So, if you're, for example, talking about marketing in the marketing section, you might identify that there's an issue of reaching this type of customers because, for example, your customers might be senior people and they might not be using social media as much as you would hope. So, for example, they might have to be reached through other channels, and this has to be taken into consideration. So, just by saying, because my customers are seniors, I'm going to use channels X and Y, you're already signaling that you know what the risks are and that you already envisioned how to overcome them. So you don't have to directly say, my risk is not being able to reach my customers. So that's basically some of the things that would be the most important as key factors for the assessment. And just to kind of close with a slide talking about the credibility and viability of the business. My top advice is you need to focus on the exit strategy just because you want to demonstrate that the business is temporary in nature, that you fully plan on leaving, and that you are not doing this just to get into the country and then never look back and don't even implement the business plan in real life. So the second thing is to show evidence of operating and proof of demand. So those two things are extremely important. Number one, you need to prove that there are people who are interested in something like this, or businesses if you're B2B. And then you also need to show evidence that you are already implementing your plans to reach those people, to ask them what they need, and whether or not they would be interested in your service. You also have to select an idea that's scalable and that has growth potential. So it has to be an idea that can be developed over time and that you can anticipate hiring a lot of people, investing a lot of money, and ultimately giving a significant boost to the Canadian economy. And lastly, but I think that's the most important part, you have to have a clear value proposition. So it's not just about saying what is it that you do, it's about elaborating how what you do is different from what others are doing and how your idea is innovative, different from others, and bound to succeed. Thank you so much for joining our session today, and I hope you found it useful.